Afternoon, folks. Good afternoon. Put your names on the agenda so we can get a good roll call. Good morning, Mason, or good afternoon, I should say. Hi, Madison. Let's see. How's it going, Courtney? Mason, I hope you're doing all right. Hi, Katie. Hello, Shay and Elizabeth. I hope you're well. Kira. Hello, Kira. Hi, Shaniqua. Tamika. Hello, Tamika. Madison Oaks. Hello there. Got Mason there. Okay, Destiny. Hope you're well. No fever, no sore throat, or anything like that. You see here. Hello, Courtney. Destiny, did I ask you if you were well? And you said, no, sir, you're not well. So you're not well. Hi, Jason. Destiny, you don't have a fever and a sore throat and all that, do you? Oh, good. Okay. Glad you're well. Well, James. Maybe some of the others are having a tough time getting on. Couldn't even finish one of these streamings yesterday. All the acoustics were broken up, and then all this buffering was going on, so we just had to close it out. Oh, Nani. How nice of you to drop in here. And Michaela. Oh, okay, Michaela. Glad you're here, Michaela. Give them a couple of more minutes and then we'll start. We'll be on about page 382, chapter 11. Here comes Nene. Okay. Hello, Antonia. Okay, the others may be trying to get on. It may just be crowded. So we'll deal with that when they come in. All right, so I think we started chapter 11, isn't that right? Tamika, started chapter 11, nervous system, is that right? Okay, good. So let me ask you a couple of questions. If someone asked you what you were studying in school, and you told them the nervous system, and they might say, well, what is the function of the nervous system? What answer would you give them? What would you give them, Jason? What answer would you give them in terms of what is the function of the nervous system? Okay, that's one. Send messages to parts of the body so they carry on the function. All right. Well, that's a start. Jason, are you there? What's the function of the nervous system? There we come. Communication with everything in the body. Okay, so the body talks with each other and homeostasis is maintained. How about it, Nani? Any idea about what the function of the nervous system is? Okay, you getting, let's see, you said, Shaniqua, you said our, let's see, everything jumped right then. Oh, you retracted your message, Shaniqua. You were sort of on the right track there, kiddo. All of you are correct about that. Perceptions, that's right. Now, let's go a little further with perceptions. How about good, send and receive sensory information and carries out functions? Okay. Tamika, that's right. That's good. Back to Shaniqua's thought. How about picking up, let's say, stimuli as opposed to perceptions? Perception seems to be more of a thinking kind of thing. So how about stimuli in the environment? What sort of stimuli do you get from the environment right now? What kind of stimuli are you receiving at this moment? That's right, Kira. You're hearing my voice, aren't you? Shaniqua, how about something else that you might be receiving? Oh, Madison beat you to it. You're seeing a picture of me on your computer screen. That's right. Sometimes things are so obvious we wonder, what in the world can I say about that? But that's right. I'm picking up sensations from my vision. I'm hearing. Of course, I'm not hearing you guys. You guys are hearing me. That's right, Shaniqua. Sight. Mm-hmm. That's right. How's the temperature in your house? Is it comfortable? Your skin is picking up on that. Feeling hot or cold. That's right. You know, the weather's going a little bit like this now. That's just the way it does in South Carolina until it finally turns hot. you guys have a little bit of lunch already? Did you get a drink while you were? Okay, good. Nene, Moses, smell. That's correct. Is your mom at home cooking some kind of meal? But you're right, Nene. See, those are stimuli from the environment. So that's taste, very good. That's right. If you had a little something to drink, Pepsi or something like that, then you excited your taste buds. So those are stimuli that come into our perception and our understanding, receiving messages. What is meant by the term autonomic? What is meant by the term autonomic? Some of you kind of hinted around that in some of your answers. Shaniqua, you said something right here in this one of these responses to my questions. You use that word involuntary. What does that mean? Okay, unconscious movement, yeah. Your GI tract is moving and you're not necessarily aware of it. You're certainly not controlling it, are you? Sometimes we feel our intestines moving around inside our abdominal cavity. We can't control it ourselves, that's right. Things do happen automatically, that's correct. All of you have probably had your mouth start watering when you began to smell something cooking on the stove, or you went into a restaurant and got some of those fragrances from what they're cooking. So yeah, those responses are automatic. That's right, Shaniqua, involuntary. It happens without us controlling it. Actually, the term autonomic means independent. All of us like our autonomy. We like being independent. Being able to go to a movie when we want to, being able to go out to supper when we want to. Independent, we're not under somebody's rule in a sense. Now, obviously, we have police and so forth to keep the bad guys in line, because some people just want to act ugly, We've seen that plenty of times. Some people just want to hurt other people because they're upset and not happy themselves. So they're going to ruin your life too. So autonomic means that it's independent of our conscious control. As you look over on page 382, page 382, come down that second column, and you get into the functional divisions of the nervous system, and you come down to where you see the second paragraph, sensory or afferent division, and you come down a little farther, motor or efferent division. So both sensory and afferent mean the same thing. Messages come to the central control, your brain, and you're made aware of things, of some situation. And then you make a choice, you respond, and messages go back out through the motor or the efferent division. So when we start talking about an axon, we might, or a neuron, is it an afferent neuron? Is it an efferent neuron? Afferent neurons take messages to the central nervous system, and efferent neurons take messages away from the central nervous system. Now, we covered that chart down on the bottom of page 383, didn't we? Figure 11.3 shows you the divisions of the central and the peripheral nervous systems. We covered that, didn't we? How about it, Madison Becker? Did we cover that? Katie Hurst says she didn't think we covered that. Okay, let's go down then. Let's go down to the bottom of page 383. Well, let me ask you this. Did we cover on page 382 that diagram 11.1? So we really haven't started the nervous system, have we? We have not started it. Is that correct? Okay. So let's look on 382. And as you look on page 382, figure 11.1, you see the picture of the young man. You see over on the left-hand side, it says CNS, Central Nervous System, two structures, two components. The brain and the spinal cord. Now remember, your brain is encased in the skull. And your spinal cord is encased in what? In what is your spinal cord encased? That's correct, Katie. Your vertebra. I think you probably have already gone through that in the lab. And of course, your vertebrae have little discs between them, so you can bend this way and that way and sideways and so forth. But those bones, that's one of the functions of the bones, is to protect, isn't it? Don't forget that. We're coming up close to a test. We'll get to it a little bit later, though. Before we finish, I'll give you some information. So the skull protects your brain, the vertebral column, the vertebra protects your spinal cord. And the brain and the spinal cord make up your central nervous system. Now look to the right. You see PNS, or peripheral nervous system. Those are the nerves that go out to the extremities. The brain may be up here in the skull, but It sends forth nerves that come out to the edges of our, in this case, our face. There are nerves that go to your eyes. That's outside of the cavity in which the brain is resting. Those are called cranial nerves. How many of you have been to the dentist? You had to open your mouth and he went back in the back and put a needle back there. We would say put to sleep the nerve. What they do is they prevent nerve impulses from being produced. And so we say that area is asleep or that area is numb. But that nerve comes from your brain and comes down into your mouth and goes right along your jaw. Got a branch up here, got a branch down here. Those are cranial nerves. They come from the cranium. They're still peripheral because they're not in the cranium. They're outside of the cranium. They came from the brain, went to your eyes, went to your mouth, got some to come to your ear. And then you look at the spinal cord and you see these nerves coming off up around the neck, come down the arm and hand, come into the chest and the abdomen, and then you see nerves also going down the legs. And so those outside the central nervous system make up the peripheral nervous system. Peripheral is a word you most likely you don't use very often, but it simply means the edges. Some of you may know some people who have what they call PVD. PVD. Now, you don't have to know that. Hello, Cameron. Let's see, where were we? As I was saying, some of you may know some people who have what they call PVD, and that's peripheral vascular disease. That's one of the problems that comes up when someone has diabetes. Peripheral, we think of the edges of the body, and of course that usually shows up in those people with their toes and their feet. The circulation is bad. So they call it peripheral because it's toward the edge of the body, and then vascular disease. Now, we'll get to that whenever you get to the cardiovascular system this summer, if you take it this summer. But anyway, the point is the peripheral nervous system goes outside the body, all the way down your arms, into your organs, down your legs, all the way to your feet. Now, let's look over at this chart on page 383. You said we haven't gone over that, so we need to go over that, get some things square in our heads. Down at the bottom of page 383, figure 11.3. So you see the central nervous system right at the top of that little diagram, brain and spinal cord, and you see you got two arrows. One arrow on the right goes down, and that becomes cranial nerves or spinal nerves. Now you can divide that peripheral nervous system, as you see, into two categories, two divisions. The motor on the right, motor being efferent, sensory on the left being afferent. So some of those nerves go into the motor division. They're going away from the central nervous system, and they split, and some of them go to the somatic division, and you think of your skeletal muscles. Now, when we think of skeletal muscles, we typically think of the muscles in the arm, like the biceps and the triceps and the deltoid and so forth, and the muscles in the legs. I guess you guys have probably gotten into that to some degree, the quadriceps and the vastus lateralis and so forth. But these muscles up here are also skeletal muscles, because you can control them, so they're voluntary. So when you make shapes with your lips so that you can make these sounds that we take as language, and we understand each other's language, so you can control those. Those are under your control. You go to the right, and here's the one we were talking about, the autonomic nervous system. Autonomic means independent, and you look at the structures that this system controls automatically. You're correct. It does control it automatically. You don't have to worry about it. When it says smooth muscle, you really ought to have visceral muscle, because we talk about skeletal and cardiac, and that tells you where they are. Visceral tells you they're in the organs. They are smooth in appearance, but you're not concentrating on moving your food through your GI tract. You're not concentrating on your heart rate. Probably you're pretty relaxed. And then you see glands. Some of these nerves go to our glands and cause them to function. Now, as we mentioned glands, I think we mentioned this a few moments ago. Whenever you come home and you are ready to eat, and maybe your mother has prepared your meal, or maybe you have prepared your meal, maybe your husband has prepared your meal. He likes to cook like a lot of guys on ETV and so forth. But you come in and you smell all that good food, and your mouth literally starts watering. That's because in the sensory portion of the nervous system, which we'll mention in just a second, impulses go up through your nose. They go to a certain part of your brain, and either, if you like it, then messages come down, and your salivary glands begin to produce moisture in order that you can moisten the food with your saliva. You can begin digesting the food with your saliva. You swallow it. You might even produce more mucus so that food slides down more easily. And you don't have control over that. It happens automatically, independently of your thinking. So that's the motor division, the efferent division. Now you move over to the left, and you see the sensory division. The somatic sensory division As you see, it says carries general sensory signals from muscles. That's if you stretch them too far, or if you get a bruise on a muscle, you can damage the muscle fibers and the myofibrils in there. And you got some pain, you got swelling, hurts to move the muscle. Those sensations of pain go right back up on a sensory neuron as opposed to a motor neuron on the right. Goes up a sensory neuron into the spinal cord, up to the brain, and you are aware of the pain. And we mentioned looking into the screen and you see me talking. That's because your nerves in your eye, they're outside of the brain, which is kept in that little cranial vault. They're picking up my image and sending it back to your occipital lobe in your brain. And you know that you're looking at me because you've met me and we've spent 4 or 5 weeks together. So you recognize me. I recognize you. That's part of the sensory division. Now look at the next block where it says visceral sensory division. So your nerves in those organs tell you sometimes there's a problem. They bring the message up to your brain and you understand there's something going wrong in my GI tract. All of you, I would imagine, have been nauseated. I hate nausea. I'm sure you do too. But you see, that's a message transferred from your stomach back into the central nervous system and up to your brain, and you are aware there's a problem in my GI tract. The same thing can happen to your bladder. Your bladder reaches a stretching due to the urine that you and I produce. There are nerve endings that pick up on the stretch of the tissue and they send a message from your pelvic cavity through the nerves back to the central nervous system. And you know, I need to go find a bathroom. Have any of you ever had an appendicitis? So none of you have had an appendicitis. Well, I'm glad for you. I've never had one either, but it is not fun. You can have nausea. You can have pain in that right lower quadrant. Got to do something about that. Your body's telling you, we got a problem. Ooh, that's great. I'm glad you guys have not had that problem. But if you ever do, your nerves are going to pick up on it and they're going to bring it to your brain and you're going to be aware and then you're going to go do something about it. Do you feel comfortable with that chart? Okay. Let's look at the figure 11.2 of the lady that's kicking the soccer ball. You can figure this out pretty easily. You can see what she's doing. She sees the ball coming. That's a visual input. That's visual input. So as she looks at that ball, those sensory nerves in her eyes pick up that image of the ball and transfer it to the backside of her brain. Now, you look at number 2 up there. Integration. Her brain receives and integrates the sensory input. In other words, it makes sense out of what's happening. And she is probably thinking about the timing of the ball coming. What's its height off the ground? Is there a curve to it or whatever? And she is going to lift her leg and kick that to somebody else. Or perhaps try to get it in the goal. Get it in the net. But she's thinking inside. And so there's that split-second thinking that, when you played soccer, some of you may have done that. You know where the ball is going, and you take that step to hit it with whichever foot you're going to use. So you've made a choice, and the next thing you know, you're in front of that ball, and that leg is coming around to hit it. So there's where your number 3 down there by her foot says motor output. That message came from the brain, down the spinal cord, actually went in a number of places in the body, not just the leg, because if some of you played soccer, your arms help you keep balance while you're swinging your foot through the ball. And so your whole body participates in that response to the ball coming towards you. So the whole body acts as a unit. The hands and arms come up to help you keep your balance. And the other leg that's on the ground keeps you stable while you swing the other leg to hit the ball. It's amazing, isn't it? Of course, we learn those activities over a period of time, and it becomes natural for us to do that. Just as it's natural for you to, can we say, chew gum and walk at the same time? That's all that coordination that happens over a period of time as you do something. So you've got a circuit there, pick up on the message, goes inside, gets into various parts of the brain, and you're thinking what you want to do, and your arms, your hands, your legs, your body all work together, in this case, to kick the ball. So let's look over on page 384. Page 384. We're going to look at neurons. So on 384, come down the second column, and you should see the heading, neurons. You want to get a definition of what a neuron is. So as you look in the second column, you come down to that bold print term that says neurons are the excitable cell type responsible for sending and receiving signals in the form of action potentials. That's your definition for a neuron. The excitable cell responsible for sending and receiving signals in the form of an action potential. Action potential may be somewhat of a new word for you. Most of you know what action is. It's going to involve usually some kind of movement. Let's take action, Lynn. Let's put that fire out. And we pour water on it or put dirt on it or something like that. Potential means we use that word to say you have a lot of potential, which means you've got the ability to carry out certain things. You have the potential to be a good nurse because your bedside manner is very compassionate. Or you might say you're going to be a good PA or a physician because I see that you can work through things and you figure out all the components that are bringing a problem into somebody's life, and you ask the right questions and go deeper than I would go deeper. So this means you have that ability. So this is an ability to produce action on our part. You're going to find out that action potential can come under the heading of a number of comparable terms, like you might say a nerve impulse. Or as you might see before that, it's a signal. It's a message. Some people call it an electrochemical message. They got all these words for it, but they're basically the same thing. Now look at the next sentence. Recall that most neurons are amitotic, means that they cannot regenerate. They cannot reproduce. They've lost their centrioles. You remember the centrioles compose a little organelle. Fascinating stuff there. How they turn into those spindle fibers and lock on to a chromatid after it's been duplicated. And then those spindle fibers pull those chromatids apart. Nobody has to tell them to do that. It's in the genes. It's planned like that. It's incredible. Just incredible to think about. And you don't think about it at all, except probably on a test. But your keratinocytes are certainly mitotic, aren't they? But the neurons, they're not. They're amitotic. So if we lose some, I'm probably losing a few at 73 years of age, but I still got enough to make it go. All right, so let's look at the neuron on page 385. Figure 11.5. So as you look at the neuron, you want to circle some things. There are going to be a number of features of the neuron that you want to be familiar with, structural features. So you start at the top and you see dendrites. All of those little yellow projections that are very slender and have a number of branches, they're dendrites. Dendrites receive messages and send them to the cell body. That's their function. They pick up on impulses, they pick up on messages, stimuli, however you want to say it. And they transfer, transmit, send action potentials, impulses, to the cell body. And you see the next term as you come down from the top is the cell body. Now, looking at the cell body, remember it's a cell. So it's going to have features like the cells that make up our skin, the keratinocytes that from the stratum basal that eventually become the epidermis. So working our way from the inside, you see the purple ball. That purple ball is going to be the nucleus, as you see. What is inside the nucleus? What is inside the nucleus, Madison Becker? What structures? What substances? Just name one. One structure, one substance. DNA, very good. Mason, help her out. Name another one. Good, Jason, you said a nucleolus. That's true. And chromosomes, of course, and that's what we call the DNA inside. Anything else inside there? The nucleolus is good. Chromosomes. Of course, chromosomes are composed of DNA. Anything else in there? MA. What is MA? Expand on that, Elizabeth. What is MA? Okay, that's a little clearer there, Elizabeth. Thank you. RNA, that's correct. And of course, RNA is made by the DNA, isn't it? Don't forget protein synthesis. That is going to go all the way through anatomy, and it's going to get into microbiology. So don't forget that. That is a foundational event, protein synthesis and RNA synthesis and so forth, okay? So you see the nucleus, you look to the left of the nucleus and you see kind of little reddish pink fellows, and you see they're labeled mitochondrion. Mitochondrion is the singular form of mitochondria. So there are a number of mitochondria to produce ATP. Even though you are resting in your chair, I assume, maybe you're on your couch or something with a laptop on your tummy or something like that. But it's going to make, that's right, that's what they call it, Madison, the powerhouse of the cell. It makes ATP. It makes an energy-loaded molecule. Now, notice right under mitochondrion, you see Nissl bodies. That's excuse me, probably a new term to you. And you see in parenthesis what Nissl bodies are. Now, the reason they call them Nissl bodies is because a guy named Nissl is the one who discovered them. This is one of the challenges when you are reading people's work from 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. They name things oftentimes for the person who discovered them. Now, that's a nice honor, but if somebody said, oh, my Nissl body's hurt, well, what in the blazes is Nissl bodies? I've never heard of that. I know about fingers and toenails and all that. What are you talking about? So they name it after people, and everybody goes, what? But they put in parentheses what Nissl bodies are. Collection of ribosomes and rough ER. He didn't necessarily know everything that was there at that point, but because he discovered it, They tried to give him some honor and appreciation there. So if you got ribosomes and ER, what event is going on? It's protein synthesis. Can't get away from that stuff. Don't try. Incorporate it up here. Now let's move to the right, and you see where the cell body becomes narrowed, kind of like a little spout. And you see up right above there, that line that comes down has a circle around that area that kind of narrows, and that's called an axon hillock. That's the point at which the sending structure, an axon, gets its physical start. So that's where the axon begins. Now notice right below the axon hillock, and you see a line that says axolemma. What in the world could that be? Just from what you've known in the last 5 weeks, 6 weeks. How long have we been in school? Half of January, all of February, most of March. Yeah, about 6, 7 weeks. Yeah, Madison, that's correct. It's the shell of the axolemma. Tell me, Madison, what was the sarcolemma? Tamika, you're dead on it. You're dead on it, Tamika. Madison, she beat you there, beat you to it. You're right, it's a shell, but we wouldn't call it a shell. We'd call it as Tamika has done, a cell membrane. Remember the sarcolemma? Sarcolemma was the muscle cell membrane. And what kind of structure does a membrane have? It's a phospholipid bilayer, isn't it? So is this. A lot of consistency through the body. Got a lot of phosphobilipid layers all through this body. So the axolemma is the cell membrane of the neuron. Sarcolemma is the cell membrane of the muscle cell. And then in other places, we say it's just the cell membrane. You'd think they'd just be real, I lost my word there, consistent. And just I'll call all of them the cell membrane. Kind of interesting, isn't it? That's right. Phospholipid bilayers. Those are right, Destiny, Madison, Shaniqua. Okay. Now, here goes the axon to the right. Now, the axon is going to be this yellowish tube. It's an extension of the cell. Instead of being nice and round like we typically think of a cell, this tube is an extension of the cell. So it's going to have a cell membrane all the way down. Follow it all the way down. Keep going where you see axon. You see the little arrows are pointing to the yellow structure. We'll talk about the little purple stuff after a while. Just follow it on to the right and it curves around. Some of these axons can be 3 or 4 feet long, depends on how tall you are. You've got axons that run all the way down your buttock and your thigh and your knee and your lower leg and down to your feet. Long. We got about 37 miles of nerves in the human body. 37 miles. Trying to think. maybe driving over to Hartsville maybe, and then driving back. That might be at 30 miles total. So we got about 37 miles of nerves in our body. But you can see that axon eventually reaches the point where you're going to see little branches. And those little branches are called telodendria. Now, if you follow those little branches, you see it looks like they got a little enlargement on the end. And you go to the left and you see this term called Axon Terminals. Now, I want you to go back to 352. 352. Now, you're familiar with this. We've only gone over it about 3 times. But see, there's the axon terminal. And you see how the axon terminal spread out a little bit? I think we might have mentioned camel's hoof or something like that. And in this case, the axon terminal joins with a muscle. Doesn't touch the muscle, but it makes a connection there it doesn't physically touch the sarcolemma, but that's the axon terminal. Sometimes they call that big enlargement a synaptic bulb. That's fine if you want to call it that. Yes, Madison, sometimes they do branch. You see, they call it a collateral. Sometimes they do branch. So go back to 385. And as you look at the picture of the axon again, you see where the telodendria branch out, and you see the axon terminals, and they're attached to those 2 cells, whatever they are. They're just no particular cell in your body. But you could draw yourself a little bracket on the right-hand side of those cells, and you could put, I don't know if you can see this or not. Right there. Okay. Effector. That's an effector. E-F-F-E-C-T, and then add O-R to it. Effector. That simply means that it's going to carry out some purpose that you want. It could be a muscle. It could be a gland. And of course, the gland would produce its substance that would diffuse through the body and help keep homeostasis. If it were a muscle, it would result in some sort of movement. Are you with me so far? Do you feel comfortable with that? Michael has been here, also forgot to comment. I'm glad you're here, Michael. Let's look on page 386. Got a couple more things to cover, and then we'll draw it down. So as you look on 386, you see in the second column this classification of neurons. Now, we're not going to get into the different shapes of neurons, but we are going to get into the functional classification. So as you look on page 387, and you come down the first column, come on past multipolar, bipolar, and so forth, come all the way down, and you see functional classification. And you're already familiar with these terms. There is another term that's coming up in just a second. But you see sensory neurons carry information toward the central nervous system. Somebody said, well, give me an example of a sensory neuron. And you could simply open your eyes big and wide and say, it's these nerves in my eye that are carrying a picture of you back to the backside of my brain. Or you could say it's a nerve in your nose that picks up the smell of a carcass on a highway. Dead animals don't smell that good, do they? You go to the second column, and you see interneurons, association neurons. Those are the ones in your brain that take the message and send it to several points. So that you have an overall response as a body to a situation. If you're riding one day in a car when it's a very pleasant temperature and the windows down and all of a sudden you smell a dead deer, there's a number of things that go on. You are over there cranking that. Well, you don't crank that now anymore. My truck's got cranks on it. But you probably have the little button you just hit and raise and hope that motor works. But several muscles, several parts of your body are going to come together to accomplish that. Shut the window so we don't have to smell that stuff. And then, of course, that's the thinking that goes into it, and the thinking is carried out by the motor or the efferent neuron. Takes information away, carries information away. It's really an electrical charge that's going down your neuron, and we call that information. It's fascinating. It is fascinating. Okay. Let's look at one more thing. Look at the next paragraph. Structural groups of neuron components. Okay, you see in the second line, got an itch in my nose. In the CNS and PNS, specific neuron components grouped together. Specific neuron components, axons, okay, cell bodies and so forth. For example, cell bodies of neurons are typically found within clusters, a group of them together, which most of which are in the CNS, where they are called nuclei. And I would imagine you're going, oh, wait a minute. A nucleus is inside a cell. It's true. Not arguing that, not at all. But when you get a group of those cell bodies together, they will call that a nucleus. Let me look over here for just a moment. Where was it? look on page 441. And some of you may have a different edition. You're looking at figure 1216. It's a big picture. It's one of those big picture things, figure 1216. Do you see a big picture that takes up half the page? Anybody not see that? It's a picture of the brain. Elizabeth, my page is 441, and Madison, it's figure 1216. Since that's a big half-page picture, they put the figure 1216 at the top. Jason says it's 12:6 in his book. Let's see here. Well, you can look at 12:6, 12:16, or 12:6, Jason. Either one of them's got similar information on it. Okay, so you want to do 12:16. That's okay. All right, so you've got a big picture of the brain. You've got some structures in there with light green, kind of lime colors. You got some blue colors. You got some pinkish colors and so forth, salmon and all that, right? Now, I want you to look on the right-hand side of the picture. Do you see where it says caudate nucleus? That's a collection of cell bodies in that structure. Look on page, let's see, I asked you to look on page 441. Look a couple of pages back at 1213 and 1214, those two figures. What you should be looking at should be entitled External Anatomy of the Brainstem, Anterior View, Posterior View. And come down the right-hand side. Let's go in the middle between these two pictures, ventral and dorsal and ventral. And you come down, and you see on the left-hand side it says red nucleus. Come on a little farther, and you run across a term called Nucleus Gracilis. And another one, Nucleus cuneatus. Those are collections of cell bodies inside the central nervous system. Now, don't go memorize them, okay? Don't do that. I'm just showing you what we're talking about. Okay? Now, let's go back to Chapter 11. Where were we? 487. Go back to 487. Did I say 487? 387, excuse me. My bad, Jason. I did that. My fault. Now, we just got through looking at a nucleus. Now, one thing you can do, if you're not on the right page, I'm not going to ask you to identify any of the nuclei, but you can go back to the appendix, go back to the appendix, and just look up the word nucleus. And you might find that it'll tell you about the caudate nucleus, the gracilis nucleus, and so forth. Okay? Now, it's going to wrap up on this. We're back on 387. And you see, after nuclei within the PNS, clusters of cell bodies are called ganglia. Clusters of cell bodies in the peripheral nervous system. Go to 451. Page 451, you should have a cross-section of the spinal cord. Figure 1224. You can see it looks like a butterfly in the middle of that cross-section. If we're looking at the right thing. One lady this morning said her picture was on page 458, so you might try that. Elizabeth, it should be 1224. 1224, Elizabeth. Should have down there at the bottom, overview of internal spinal cord structure and function. Now, as you look at this picture, let me hold it up for just a second. Maybe you'll recognize it if you have it in a different, not this one over here, but this one over here on your right as you're looking at it. See, that's a cross section there, the spinal cord. So you see it says posterior up at the top. That's the back of the spinal cord. And you come out to your right and you see a posterior root. And then you see an enlargement. And that enlargement is a ganglion. You see it's called a posterior root ganglion. Sometimes it's called a dorsal root ganglion. Same thing. It's outside of the central nervous system. That is a collection of cell bodies outside the central nervous system. Cell bodies of axons. So all of us have these little ganglion going down beside our spinal cord. It's outside the cord, okay? It's peripheral nervous system, but it's outside the cord, and you got a pair at each vertebra where each nerve comes off. You probably have looked at the vertebra. You know about the intervertebral foramen, and then you've got your foramen in the very middle of the vertebra, but you've got these little scooped out areas where the nerves can get out. Okay, so far so good. Now, most of you guys have not had chicken pox because you were young enough to have been vaccinated. My generation, you just got it, stayed out of school for a week or something like that, and came back. Some kids died from chickenpox. Most of them did not. Most of us lived. So when we got through having that chickenpox, the virus that caused that chickenpox never left my body. It is present in the dorsal root ganglion or the posterior root ganglion. So it's still there in me. How many of you have seen those commercials where people lift their shirt up and you see all these lesions on their back, maybe coming around toward the front? What do they call that condition? What do they call that problem? That's right, Mason. It's called shingles. And what happens here is that virus, if it became active in me, as you look at that picture, that virus would leave that ganglion and come out toward the right. It would go out to the sensory nerves that would, you're guessing right, Madison Becker. I don't know. Yeah, it's shingles. You're right. And it causes all these lesions and all these pain episodes. It's just plain horrible. But that's what can happen to somebody like me. Now, you guys been vaccinated, so you haven't had chickenpox. But since I've been vaccinated, since I had chickenpox, I've made an immunity to it. But as you get older, it doesn't hit as hard as it used to. Your immune system does not work as well as it used to. So my doctor said, I want you to go to the pharmacy. I'm going to give you a prescription, and you're going to get the chickenpox vaccine. Destiny, you've had the chickenpox. Well, this virus is in all of your dorsal ganglia. But you're young enough to have had the vaccine. I guess maybe you got a light case of chickenpox. Is that right? Well, whatever. If you had it, then those viruses are in the dorsal root ganglia. So you've got some immunity to it. If your immune system is a healthy immune system, you've made all these good cells that can recognize that virus and sort of keep it under control. You're right. If you're 24, you probably had it at a very young age. I don't think they started doing the vaccines until, let's see, 2000, maybe 2001 or something like that, 2002. So anyway, you got it. But as you get older, if you make it to my age or whatever, the doctor's going to say, Destiny, I want you to go get a chickenpox shot because your immune system will start to not hit as hard as it used to. And that'll boost your immune system. Ooh. Sometimes people die from allergies to penicillin medicine. That's tough. Okay, a couple of more things we got to get through here real quickly. Let's go back to 387. We're still in that same area. And I want you to highlight the last sentence in that little paragraph under structural groups of neuron components. It says in the CNS, Well, look at actually the last three lines. In addition, axons tend to be bundled together in the CNS and the PNS. So they're pushed into a little group. In the CNS, the bundles are referred to as tracts, not track like a track on the street, okay? T-R-A-C-K, but T-R-A-C-T-S. And so they're called tracts in the central nervous system, and they're called nerves outside the nervous system. Well, we hustled today, didn't we? Oh, they have signed on with Honor Lock now, and so you can count on having the lecture test 3 next Thursday. So I think I can set it up where we'll do it at the time that you would meet normally, 12:30 next Thursday, and you'll have an hour and 15 minutes to take that test. We'll finally have a test under our belt. Now, you guys should ace this test. You've had 2 or 3 weeks to study for this. Make my face wrinkle upward. Okay? Do it. So you'll look on your D2L screen, and you'll see when the test is there and when you can open it up and finish it off. And I guess you send it back to me. I've never done this on D2L. See, all I've been doing is face-to-face. We did at the beginning of the semester where you had to sit at a desk. So I'm learning this stuff too. I think it'd be right just to go ahead and do it at the normal time of class, Jason, because you guys signed up for a face-to-face, and we'll just take one of those class periods and knock that test out. Well, at least one person out there is real happy about it. Well, there's 2, Donnie and Jason. They're happy to get it on the griddle and get it going. Okay, do you have any questions? So Tuesday, we will start with the neuroglia. That'll be on page 388. I'm sure you are. Okay. I guess the no sir means, Mason, that you don't have any questions. So that's great, my friend. All right. Well, I'm going to hit the end on here and close this down. Give you 15 seconds to write something if you need to. Okay, keep your hands away from your face. Thank you, Nani. Thank you, Destiny. We'll see you, Lord willing, come next Tuesday.